the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Guinea-Bissau. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is a continuation of Series 20 on the 2023 African Cup, played in 2024. We have done a full and short version of the groups and teams for the African Cup here, and now we're looking at the players of each team. So this episode covering Guinea-Bissau's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. We think that'll be in early January. At that time, we'll go back over the list we compiled today and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a few other things that I'll talk about at the end of this mediacast. We did do a media cast on the players of Guinea-Bissau going into the 2021 African Cup. Again, that took place in January 2022, so it was in just before that we did it. And you can check the link in the show notes for that. That provided biographies on the candidates in quite a bit of detail. Since a lot of that is still relevant, we've decided not to commit ourselves to full player media casts every 2 years for the African region. So we're going to be treating this one as more of an update. In that series, we were able to show who made the final squad and who didn't make it, but we could only go as far as predicting the starters. We needed to wait to watch the actual cup to see who the starters were. So here, we're going to begin with the list we compiled for the previous cup. We'll review who made the squad and update by saying who the starters were. Then we will turn our attention to the 2023 Cup here and update the players based on their participation over the past 2 years. And thus we will emerge with a new list of players and their likelihood of making it. Also, we're going to put a few players in the spotlight. These will be players who are either at the likely or definite level to reach the squad. Those who were not covered in the previous media cast, and those players who have a good chance of starting. So those are our kind of three criterion for the spotlight players. Any main players that we don't review were covered in the media cast in the previous cup. Again, if we don't give details then on the players here, you can check out that podcast, and the information is not too outdated. So again, we refer you to the link to that mediacast 2 years ago in the show notes. And for fun, we're going to finish with our early predictions of starters for this cup, and we'll also finish by letting you know what to expect in part two. Okay, we have made a separate video on what we will be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see that link on the screen here, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. Just briefly, we have completed our series on the groups and teams, both short and long versions there, for the Asian Cup, as well as the part one of the players part. So we've covered the players of all 24 teams for the 2023 Asian Cup. And now, having done the groups and teams for the African Cup also, we're focused on the players, which is what this podcast is about, of course. So again, both of those tournaments take place in early 2024, and we have also started coverage of World Cup 2026 qualifying. Okay, that is that, and let us begin now with the Guinea-Bissau players, and we will begin actually with the manager. But just a note before we begin, we're going to be putting names up in highlights here. So any players names you see in highlights were selected for the squad in 2021. Any players' names you don't see in highlights were not selected. And if it's green, they were a starter. If it's yellow, they were not a starter. And if it's blue, it's kind of in the middle. We thought they might or might not be a starter. So let us go to the manager for the 21 for the previous African Cup, and that manager was Bakiro Kandi. Bakiro Kandi, we predicted, would be a starter for the previous African Cup, and indeed he was not fired before the Cup, and he remains their manager. He's one of the longest serving managers of national African teams. He's been in charge of Guinea-Bissau since 2016. So he has led them through 3 tournaments so far. They made it in 2017, 2019, and 2021. So this will be his 4th run through. So doing well with them as a manager. Okay, and then before we start, I am going to tease you a bit of temptation by saying maybe the outstanding thing about Guinea-Bissau players is that they have impressive club affiliations. There we go. Okay, let's go back to 2021. Look at what we were thinking about goalkeepers. So we had a definite candidate in Jonas Mendes and a likely candidate in Maurice Gomes. And we had a couple of players who seemed to be off the squad. And I'm not really going to add these players to the list in order to keep things simple, unless they are part of the narrative now. So those 2 players were not. However, a new player was added, Manuel Balde, who is part of the narrative now. So let's see what happened there. Jonas Mendes was selected for the Cup, but he was not the starter. He started game 2, and it was actually our likely candidate, Maurice Gomes, who started games 1 and 3. And Manuel Balde did make the squad, but he was the 3rd string keeper for the squad. Okay, now we can get rid of the highlights from 2021 and start anew. And Gomes, sorry, the starter there. No, we'll start with Mendes. Mendes, we have moved from a definite down to a likely candidate. He has started less than half of the games, but we'll update that soon. Meanwhile, Maurice Gomes seems to be off the squad. He may have lost his starting position and his spot on the team because he has no club. So he remained the starter up until September 2022 and has not been selected since. And again, we think that's because after leaving his club in Cyprus in 2022, he hasn't yet found a new club. So he's unattached. Okay, but we do have a few players to add. So Manuel Balde was a newly added player to the squad, and now we have him as just a possible candidate. However, he was a regular until he was not selected for the last 3 games. So a bit up in the air as to whether he will make it to the squad this time. And we have 2 other possible candidates, Selton BI and Uparin Joko. Both of them possible candidates. So Selton GI had been actually on the bench for Portugal's team in March of 2023, and is credited with subbing in October 2023 for Guinea-Bissau, but the other source, the main source I use, just has him on the bench for both of their November matches. So he actually plays for Vitória Guimarães in Portugal and was with Benfica. So again, impressive club affiliations there. So he's a promising candidate, but just came in at the end. And also coming in at the end is Uprin Joko. Got his first 2 cap. He actually started one of the 2 games at the end there and was on the bench for one other. So Manuel Balde looked like the backup keeper, but now these 2 candidates perhaps challenging him. And we think 3 of those 4, Jonas Mendes and 2 of the others, will make it to the squad. So let's see. As I said, it was Gomez in 2 of the games in the Cup and Mendes in the other. And it was Gomez actually after the Cup up until September 2022. And then Mendes started all but one of the last 6. And newcomer Joko started the other. So there we have it. None of those players will be in the spotlight because they're not likely to be starters. Okay, let's move on to defenders, and we do central defense. So we'll begin with what it looked like back in 2021. And we had a definite candidate in Alpha Semedo and 2 likely candidates in Marcelo Diallo and Rudnilson Silva. 2 possible candidates in Eddie Gomez and Shimao Jr. And 1 player who seemed to be off the squad. We won't mention those so as to not overcomplicate things. However, we did have 2 players added when we got to part 2. So they were added to the preliminary roster, and that was Fernandi Mendy and Edgar Ye. So quite a few candidates there, and this is quite complicated. Alpha Semedo actually was selected, but he is coded as a central midfielder, so he was not part of the central defense. So we'll talk more about him when we get to central midfielders, but he's gone from the list here. Our 2 likely candidates, Marcelo Diallo, was not selected, and nor was Rudnilson Silva, and so he is off the squad now, having last played in November of 2021. The 2 possible candidates, Eddie Gomez, also off the squad. He also last played in November 2021. He wasn't selected. However, Shimao Jr. was selected for the squad. And we have him here in a green highlight, suggesting we thought he was a starter, but I find that a bit hard to believe because he only started 2 games prior to that cup. So he never looked like he was going to be a starter. Anyway, we'll leave it as it is. We have Mendy Fernandi, who was not selected. Hang on, just making sure of that. No, he was selected, and Edgar EA was not selected, and part of that was due to injury. He was selected for the preliminary squad and didn't make the final cut because of that injury. And now let's see what we have. Oh, in terms of who started, then you may be wondering who started, and they are names we're going to add to the list here because they're still relevant. Sori Mane was the starter. He had been coded as a central midfielder and actually still is, but he started as a central defender alongside Opa Sanganti. So we'll meet him actually in central midfielders too, because he was coded as a central midfielder in 2021. Now he's coded as a central defender, so he's back where he should be. So that was a situation. Really, we couldn't have been much more wrong in our guesses there. But a couple of these players still remain. So let's go and see what the situation is here. I'm going to remove the highlights from 2021 from the previous cup. and we're going to replace Fernandi Mendy with his name in black lettering because he has now completed a tournament. And let's begin with these players. So Marcelo Giallo was not selected for that cup, but for this one we consider him still a likely candidate. He was off the squad for 2 years, but started the last one. But now let's go back and add those players. Actually, I'm going to add Sori Mane as a possible on the central defense. He's actually moved back into the central midfield, so I don't think he's going to play as a defender, but we didn't expect that in the previous cup either, and he started all 3 games. However, we will put Opa Sangante as a definite candidate. He started 11 of their 14 games, so we think he'll not only make the squad, but will be a starter. We've already put Marcelo Giallo as a likely candidate, and we have another one in Nito Gomez. And we still have Edgar Ye as a possible candidate, but once again this time he's kind of struggling with injury. So at the time we're doing this, which is early December, he still looks like an injury doubt, or not still, it's a new injury, but a possible candidate if he does recover from that injury. Meanwhile, we have to take Shimao Jr. off the list. He's no longer a candidate. He hasn't appeared since the African Cup. And we have 2 more possible candidates to add in Pedro Justiniano and Baba Fernandez, both possible candidates there for the squad. So let's review what we've got. So it was, as we saw, Sori Mane and Sangante in the cup in all 3 games. And actually, Sori Mane continued in that role until fairly recently alongside Sangante. Baba Fernandez came in, our possible candidate, Baba Fernandez, alongside Sangante for the September game. But for the 2 November games, it's been Marcelo Giallo. So right now we think Sangante and someone else, Giallo being the most likely candidate, but we're not really ready to call him a starter quite yet. Okay, so Sangante we are calling a starter, and I don't think I clarified Mendy Fernandez. He is off the squad since June 2022. So even though he was added back in the last cup, he's now off. Okay, that was a bit complex, partly because none of the players we predicted actually were starters. Hopefully we'll do a little bit better at left back here. So at left back, we go back to the previous cup, and we had Fali Kandi as a definite candidate, and that is all we had in terms of candidates. So let's see, he was selected for the cup, and he did start all 3 games there, so that is fairly straightforward. We'll remove that highlight now and see who the candidates are. Still, it is Fali Kandi, but down to a likely candidate now. We also have Sana Gomez as a possible candidate, a new player on the team there. And we have one possible but unlikely who we won't add unless he appears on the final roster here. So what the situation in left back recently has been Fali Kandi in 4 of the last 6 games, but actually right back Nanu coming in for 2 games. And we'll introduce him when we get to right back. So we're still about 75% sure that Kandi will be the starter here. And if Gomez is brought, Sana Gomez, it'll probably be as a backup position. Sana Gomez, kind of an interesting story. He got 2 red cards in his first 4 international games, so maybe didn't ingratiate himself with the management there. Okay, let's move on to right backs, where we will meet Nanu soon enough. In fact, we meet him right now because we had him as a definite candidate back in the previous cup. And the only other candidates we had were seemingly off the squad. However, when the preliminary roster came out, 2 new candidates were added, and they were Elisu Kasama and Hubulang Mendez. Both of those added to the squad. And let's see who made the squad. So Nanu was selected for the squad, and so was the other 2 who were added didn't make the squad, and they are actually Elisu Kasama is off the list. I'm just making sure I'm mixing him up with a central midfielder who we'll meet soon, who's also called Kasama, but it's a different player. Anyway, Hubulang Mendez is selected or is still part of the picture, so we'll leave him on the spot. So let me get back into shape here and look at the candidates. So Nanu is still on the squad. We'll remove the highlights here. And Hubulang Mendez did not make the squad, so he is still yet to go through his first tournament, but he is still around. Nanu was not a starter in the cup. Actually, he had coronavirus for games 1 and 2, so maybe he would have been. But he saw no action in the cup, and it was actually a different player, Jefferson Nkada, who came into the starting spot there, starting all 3 games, and he is now a likely candidate for the right back position. Nanu moves down from definite, as we thought in 2021, down to a likely candidate also. And Hubulang Mendez moves to a possible candidate. He started 2 of the last 4 games, so actually kind of recently inserting himself there, and those were our candidates. So as I said, Nkada in all 3 games in the cup, and then recently Nkada played 3 of the last 6. Nanu had 2 games on the right side, but he also, as we saw, had 2 games on the left side, and Hubulang played in the last game in November but got red carded there, so that suspension actually may carry over to the cup. I'm not sure if they have any friendlies there that it can be worked off there, so that might be a strike against him, that red card. Okay, let us move on now to the midfield, and we begin with central midfielders. We begin with defensive midfielders, and what we had in the previous cup. So what we had was 3 names. We had Bura as a definite candidate, sometimes called Bura Nogira, but usually just Bura. We had Jao Jakit as a definite candidate, and here is where we had Opa Sanganti as a definite candidate. So we saw that he did make the squad, but was a starting central defender. So we're going to remove him from the list here. We had a new candidate also in Panucci Camara, and let's see who made the squad then. Bura did make the squad, and he was a starter for all 3 games there. Jao Jakit did make the squad. He was on the roster, but actually not on the bench for any of the 3 games, and he last appeared for the team in November 2021. So we're going to take him off the list here. And Panucci Camara, sorry, he last played for the team in March 2022, so kind of came and went quickly. Oh no, sorry, Panucci Camara did make the squad. He was subbed into game 1 and then gained a starting position for games 2 and 3. But he last appeared for the team in March 2022, so he did come and go, but kind of came a little bit more than I said there. And he is actually coded as a central midfielder. I think at the time he was listed as a defensive midfielder. So that's the story with Panucci Camara. Now, we will erase the 2021 marks and look anew at what it looks like for 2023. So Bura is moved from a definite candidate down to a likely candidate. As we saw, Jao Jakit is off the squad. Okay, and really the central midfield only sometimes has a defensive and a central midfielder. A lot of times it's just 3 across, so there's not a difference among them. And in fact, in the 2021 Cup, they used 3 different formations. So they used a 4-3-3 in game 1, a 4-2-3-1 in game 2, and then a 4-1-4-1 in game 3. Bura started all 3 of those and was the stopper or the defensive midfielder in the 4-1-4-1. Since that time, Bura has missed the last 4 games, so he was quite regular until missing the last 4 games, and it's actually central midfielders who have replaced him. So that's why we move him down to likely. Being as regular as he was, we think there's a chance he could make a comeback into the team, but missing the last 4 games is a bit concerning. To continue this discussion, though, we'll have to move on to central midfielders and look at the candidates there from 2021. So we had Moreto Kasama as a likely candidate there. And here we had Sori Mane actually as a likely candidate in a central midfielder role. So let us see what happened in the Cup. Kasama was selected for the Cup and he started all 3 games there. And Sori Mane, I think the blue means that we thought they were a potential starter. Sori Mane did start, as we saw, in central defence. But we're going to leave him on the list here because now he seems to be back in the midfield. Okay, let's erase those marks and see what's happened over the last little while, the last 2 years. And we have now Sori Mane still as a likely candidate. We have Alpha Semedo, the player who was coded as a central defender last time, but is now a defensive midfielder, also a likely candidate. We have Janio Bickle, also likely, and Dalcio, coded as a central midfielder, and also a likely candidate. But we're gonna remove him from the list here because he has actually been playing as a right winger. Or a right attacking midfielder, so we'll catch up with him shortly. Meanwhile, Moreto Kasama has moved down from likely to possible candidate, and we saw that Panucci Camara is off the team now since March of 2022. So a lot of likely candidates here, and let us talk about the situation. So we saw that defensive midfielder Bura and Kasama, Moreto Kasama, started all 3 games of the Cup, and we saw Sori Mane was playing in a central midfield role. So it's been a mishmash of players since. including some out-of-position players. So all the ones here, plus more. Central defender Nito Gomez, right winger Carlos Gomez, both of those started in central midfield in the last game. However, overall, it has been Alpha Semedo. And then recently, in 4 of the last 5 games, Janio Bickel starting in the central midfield, while Kasama has drifted off the squad to a degree, first playing as an attacking midfielder and then kind of starting less and less. Okay, so in short, even though Sori Mane is likely, we're not really sure now that he's not starting in central defence if he's going to recapture a place in the central midfield, because he's only played 1 game there recently. So we do think Alpha Semedo is a starter, and it looks most like Janio Bickel now, but we're not quite ready to call him a starter. Having said that, we are going to put him in the spotlight because we think he's likely to be selected and might be a starter. So Janio Bickel has been with Guinea-Bissau since his first cap in March 2022. He started 7 of their remaining 12 games, and he was on the bench for 1. So he is quite regularly called up, and he plays for Gaziantep in Turkey since 2023, and actually has quite an impressive career in terms of the countries he's played in Russia, in Canada, in Italy, in Bulgaria, and in Netherlands, where he was actually with a couple of youth clubs, or at least 1 youth club. So Janio Bickel, he is 28 years old, and possibly a starter here. Okay, and I think that brings us to the end of the central midfield, except that I put it in the wrong place on the graphic. So we're going to go over to the left midfield now. And here in 2021, we had a likely candidate in Pele, and 2 possible candidates in Steve Ambry and Mauro Rodriguez. And all 3 of them were selected for the Cup. There we have it, and I'm going to erase the names. I should say whether they were starters or not. So Pele, he started game 1, but then he was relegated to the bench and didn't start games 2 and 3. Steve Ambry was a sub. He came into 2 of the games there, and he also started game 2, actually, so he got 1 start. And Mauro Rodriguez was also a substitute in games 2 and 3 there. Okay, now we have erased the 2021 information, and we see how things have progressed since. So meanwhile, Mauro Rodriguez has moved up to a likely position, and Pele and Steve Amber are both seemingly off the squad. So Pele last played, actually both of them, the African Cup in 2021 or January 2022 was the last we saw of them for the national team. In the case of Pele, he missed a penalty in game 1 of the Cup, and that seemed to spell the end of his career because he was subbed out and has never played for the team since. So pretty harsh there. Steve Ambry also not selected after the Cup. And not only were these players not used again, the position is basically not used again. So we do have Mauro Rodriguez as a likely candidate, but now he is a right winger, or his 2 starts. He started actually 3 of their 14 games, and 2 of them were as a left attacking midfielder. I said right winger because on my main source he's coded as a right winger. So we may need a few more games to nail down Mauro Rodriguez's position. But one thing's for sure, it's not as left midfielder, because most of their formations don't even have that position anymore, which may explain why there were no right midfielders in the 2021 squad, and there are none in the 2023 squad here either. So we move on to left wingers / left attacking midfielders. So this is in the upper left quadrant of the field, sometimes a winger, sometimes an attacking midfielder. And back in 2021, and we had no one here except one player who seemed to be off the squad at the time and turned out to be, so we won't introduce him here. I'm looking for the player Piketty on our list, and it seems like we had him as a forward. He was maybe labeled as an attacking midfielder, and I've recoded him as a left attacking midfielder here. So he was a likely candidate back in 2021, and he did start all 3 games there. So I'll actually just jump to the attacking midfielder and put his name there. But now he is being considered under the left winger or left attacking midfielder role. And as we said, he started all the games in 2021 and is a likely candidate now. And we have another likely candidate in Carlos Mane, but we're going to move him to the attacking midfielder role. So players seem to shift around a bit here. Okay, so Piketty is a real veteran on the team, and no surprise that he started all 3 games in 2021, and he has continued in that role. However, he has more and more shared the position, and with a variety of mostly out of position players. So we saw attacking midfielder Jorginho, who will meet soon, with 2 starts on the left side, and we already saw the player coded as left midfielder Mauro Rodriguez. He also got 2 starts in this role. So Piketty beginning to share it. We still consider him a likely candidate. However, he was not selected for the last 4 games, Piketty, so a bit of a doubt there. But given his history and reputation with the club, with the national team, we think he's a likely candidate. Again, if you want more details on that history, the mediacast we did in 2021 covers the bios in more detail. Okay, and we have over on the right side now, we go back to 2021 and we see likely candidates David Gomez and Iano Mbeni, and a possible but unlikely candidate who, no, we're not going to mention him. Actually, we should. A possible but unlikely candidate in Lionel Ucha Alves. Okay, let's see what became of these players. Actually, likely though they were, David Gomez and Iano Mbeni were not selected for the Cup and have not appeared since, so we remove them from the list. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Lionel Alves, was selected for the Cup, and he subbed into 2 games there. However, he has not been called up since the team, since the Cup, so we remove him from the list. And now we're going to add a couple of players to the list. One of them is the central midfielder who we briefly met earlier, Dalcio. And we have him as a likely candidate, even though he's coded as a central midfielder. He's been playing in this position, right winger or right attacking midfielder. We also have a possible candidate in the brand new Carlos Mendes Gomez, a possible candidate, and he just showed up recently, but the start he got was as a central midfielder in that confusing recent central midfield situation. So those are our two candidates here. And in the cup, it was three different players who played on the right wing. Mama Balde, who's usually a forward. In game two, Steve Ambry, who we saw as a left midfielder, now off the team. And in game three, attacking midfielder Jorginho, who we'll talk about soon because he's listed as an attacking midfielder. Recently, though, Dalcio seems to have nailed down the position almost. Attacking midfielder Quizero has stepped in a couple of times. So we think Dalcio is going to be the starter, and he's one of two players we'll spotlight. In other words, we haven't given his biography because he's new to the squad. New to the squad since his first cap in March 2022. And he started 8 of their remaining 12 games since, subbed in for 2 games and not selected for 2 games. So Dalcio is 27 years old and has been with Guinea just since 2022, so a bit late in joining, but kind of inserting himself quickly into the squad. He plays for Apoel in Cyprus since 2022 and was with a couple of Greek teams before that, but also played for Rangers in Scotland as well. So some pretty decent teams. Benfica B in Portugal, and he was born and raised in Portugal. Dalcio, a likely candidate here. Okay, let's move on to attacking midfielders, and we'll look and see what we had in 2021 or in the previous cup. We had a definite candidate in Jorginho. We did have Piketty as an attacking midfielder here as a likely candidate, and we had Mama Balde. He's actually coded as a left winger now as a possible candidate. We had possible but unlikely João Mario, who I'm adding to the list because he features into the current narrative, but we have 2 players who seem to be off the squad and a new player who we won't add to the list because they don't feature in the current narrative. So let's see what became of those players. Jorginho was not the starter that we thought he was going to be. He was not on the bench for game 1, and he subbed into game 2, and he started game 3. So I guess we were completely wrong. Piketty, as we saw, we had him as maybe as a starter, and we saw that he was a starter as kind of the left attacking midfielder. And Mama Balde, we're going to remove from the list here and talk about him when we get to the forward line. But I will say that he was a starter in all 3 games there. And we'll remove Piketty from the list here because we've already discussed him in terms of the recent cup or the 2023 cup. Okay, let's see what has become of these players then. And Jorginho moves actually down from a definite candidate to a possible candidate and joins João Mario, who moves up from a possible but unlikely to a possible candidate there. And then we have a couple of names to add. One of them is Carlos Mane. I briefly mentioned him because he's coded as a left winger, but actually the only game he played for Guinea-Bissau was as a central attacking midfielder, and we're going to put him in the spotlight right away here. But we'll just finish populating the list. We have Famana Quizera as a possible candidate too. We saw him starting a couple of times on the right side, and we also have 3 possible but unlikely candidates who we won't add to the list unless they make the final squad. So we'll save them for part 2. Okay, let's take a look at these players. or we'll take a look at the situation. So in the cup, it was central midfielder Pantucci Camara in the cup, and in other games the position didn't exist of attacking midfielders. So only in the 4-2-1-3 did the position exist. Kind of in the 4-1-4-1, and that was Pantucci Camara also. Recently, about half of the formations do have the position, but it's often central midfielders who fill it, just like Pantucci Camara in the cup. Now, central midfielder Kasama has filled it 3 times, and Carlos Mane, who we'll talk about soon, and actually, yeah. Jorginho has played left wing or right wing, I think a couple of times on each side, but has not started as a central attacking midfielder. But we do consider him a possible candidate to reach the cup. João Mario and Famina Quizera, again, Quizera got his starts on the right wing, and João Mario has just 1 start. So central attacking midfielder, not a position that's really nailed down, but we do think that Carlos Mane might have a chance, and we'll put him in the spotlight to tell you why. So Carlos Mane is actually 29 years old, and it took him a long time to join Guinea-Bissau. 2023 was his first cap, and that was in September of 2023, but he has been injured since then. So he started one of the remaining 4 games, but was injured for the last 3 matches. But because of his pedigree, we think that there's actually a decent chance of him making it. So now he's with Kayserispor in Turkey. However, in the past, from 2013 to 19, he was with Sporting Lisbon in Portugal, and he's also played with Stuttgart in Germany on loan from Sporting Lisbon. So a pretty good resume there, and depending on his injury, we think he was maybe late in joining Guinea-Bissau because he was holding out hope for joining Portugal. But, you know, if he held out that hope for as long as he did, he must have had a reasonably good chance. He never played for Portugal. He was born there, and he played 73 games for the underage teams there, but never managed to make it up to the senior team. Now he might take his opportunity to play international tournament through Guinea-Bissau, but I guess that will depend on his injury situation. Okay, let's move over to the forwards. The actual forwards, we don't have any players coded as secondary strikers, and we didn't in 2021 either. And let's look at the forwards back in 2021. So we had Frederick Mendy as a definite candidate, and likely candidates in Joseph Mendes and Alexander Mendy. Excuse me, I just have to cough here. Okay, I'm back. And we had, interestingly, a possible candidate in Jefferson Nkada. So this is where he shows up. As we saw, he was the starting right back, even though he was coded as a forward at this time. So he was not only selected for the squad, but a starter. However, not where we expected. He started as a right back. So we'll remove Jefferson Nkada from the list. Frederick Mendy did make the squad, but he was not the starter that we thought he would be. He did sub into all 3 games, coming in at around the 75-minute mark every time. Joseph Mendes is off the squad, last appeared in the African Cup, but he was selected. He started game 1 and then lost his starting position after that. Actually wasn't even on the bench there for games 2 and 3. And Alexander Mendy, Alexander Mendy is off the squad also. And for that matter, Frederick Mendy is too. He was not called up after the 2021 African Cup. He is 35 years old now, Frederick Mendy. So maybe a retiring veteran, although we don't have any official word on retirement, and he is still playing club soccer. But we do have a new list of names here. We have Mama Balde at the likely level, and then we have a whole bunch of players at the possible level, beginning with Francelino Ju, João Pedro, um, Zino Gano, Jardel or Jardel Silva, and finally Marciano Senka. All five of those players basically new to the squad with no tournament experience, or I should say new in terms of coming to the squad after the previous African Cup. So going back, it was Joseph Mendes who started game one in the Cup, and Mama Balde actually had been listed as a left winger. He started the second and third games of the Cup, and he continued, Mama Balde, to be the starter. We have him as a likely candidate. However, over the last three games, he's been replaced, and it was Francelino Ju for two of the games, and for the last game, João Pedro. So three times Mama Balde has been replaced. However, they don't seem to have decided on a replacement, so we still think Mama Balde is most likely the starter. But yeah, our percentage of confidence has gone down on that one. Okay, that does bring us to the end of the look at the candidates, and we're going to finish here with a spotlight review of the starters. So we think Bakiro or Basiro Kandi, the manager, is not going to be fired before the tournament because he's been there since 2016. So we will say we will call him a starter there. Next, we have goalkeeper Jonas Mendes. We think he's going to be a starter, but only with about 80% confidence there. More confident we are in Upa Sangante as a starting central defender, but we're only about 60% confident on Marcelo Diallo. We'll say 67% confident on Marcelo Diallo as his partner alongside Sangante. Left back, we're 80% sure that Fali Kande will be the starting left back, but we're not sure on the right back, not even confident to name a candidate there. In central midfield, we think Alpha Semedo and Janio Bikel will be the starting central midfielders, but we're not that confident in that. So that's about 67% confidence too. On the left wing, again, we're not confident enough to name a starter over there, but on the right wing we are. We think Dalcio, with about 80% confidence, will be the starter. And for the central attacking midfielder, we suspected that if sorry, his name's eluding me here, Carlos Mane comes back into fitness. Really, that's more of a hunch, though. We don't have a lot of evidence supporting it, but we think that could be the case. As far as the centre forward goes, we think Mama Balde, with 67% confidence, is going to be the starter. Again, he hasn't been there for the last three games, but they don't seem to have settled on a starter to replace him, so we think they'll go back to him. All right, that is the run through of our spotlight review, and we're going to finish with just some a little preview, even less than the graphic promises, a preview of part 2. So in part 2, we're basically going to go over this list again and say who made it and who didn't. We'll emphasize any surprises, either incoming or outgoing players. And we'll do a review, an update on injuries at that time. And we'll see closer to the cup if we're going to lose any players. Okay, well, we hope you join us for part 2. See you then. We originally planned to tag on our past, present and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.